business to come before the Honorable Judges of the Court of Common Pleas in and for the County of Montgomery here holding this day. Let them come forth appear and they shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth and this Honorable Court. The Honorable Bernard A. Moore presiding. Court is now in session. You may be seated.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
This afternoon we have the civil case of Adrian LeGree, who's the plaintiff, versus Dana Boyle, the defendant. And at this particular point in time, we have a jury and panel. Would counsel for the plaintiff like to make an opening statement to the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Rosanna Taramina, and here with me today are my co-counsel, Sunny Hong and Robin Leibowitz, and together we represent the plaintiff, Adrian LeGree. The case that you will hear today is about one's legal duty to adhere to the rules, specifically the rules of the road. It involves an intersection collision between two cars, one driven by my client, the plaintiff, Adrian LeGree, a 35-year-old professor at Beaver College. The other driven by an 18-year-old high school student, Dana Boyle. Adrian LeGree is suing Dana Boyle for damages incurred when the defendant ran a red light, causing the collision between the two cars, and damages to my client. Now this is called a bifurcated trial, and that means that today we are only concerned with liability, for whose fault it was, and not the resulting monetary damages. You will hear about the accident and the injuries that my client has suffered, but we will not be specifying the amount of money that you should award Mr. LeGree. Now, Dana Boyle is not only going to deny that this accident was due to her negligence, but she will accuse my client of negligence himself. We will show you that this is not true. Dana Boyle ran the red light of a very busy intersection, causing the collision and breaking the law. You will see that this accident was Dana Boyle's fault, and that my client's injuries are Dana Boyle's responsibilities. At approximately 6:30 p.m. on October 22, 1992, Adrian LeGree was traveling north on Main Street. He approached the intersections of Main and High. He saw a yellow light and the brake lights of the car ahead of him, and he stopped. He patiently waited for the light to once again turn green. And once it did turn green, he noticed a large pickup truck crossing through the light along High Street. He let this truck pass even though the light on Main Street was green. He then lawfully entered the intersection when out of nowhere, a black sports car driven by Dana Boyle raced out in front of him, making it impossible for him to avoid a collision. Bang. Ladies and gentlemen, you will see that Dana Boyle is the negligent party in this case. At the end of the case, the judge will instruct you of the legal definition of the word negligent. What we will do is show you fact by fact why Dana Boyle is responsible under the law for what happened that day. You will hear from the plaintiff, Adrian LeGree, who will describe to you in detail the collision and the damages that he has suffered. You will also hear from Officer Fran Krupke, the traffic safety officer with the Springtown Police Department, who was manually operating the control signal at the intersection that day. She will tell you that Dana Boyle was at least 100 feet away from the intersection when she activated the yellow signal for High Street. A driver driving at the lawful speed limit could have stopped. She will also explain several vehicle laws that Dana Boyle violated that day. Now, the defense is going to call Dana Boyle to the stand, and you will learn that Dana Boyle had only been driving alone with an adult license for 2 weeks before the accident occurred. She was racing to work. She admits that she was exceeding the speed limit and concedes that she was in the intersection solely because she was going too fast to stop. Now, the defense is also going to call Carmen Veranda to the stand, an alleged eyewitness of the accident that day. Curiously, you will find that Carmen Veranda told Officer Krupke that he did not even see the accident. You'll also be learning about some very curious past history between the defendant and Carmen Veranda. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Members of the jury, listen carefully to the testimony presented to you today. Learn to distinguish the motivation of these witnesses. The evidence will show that it was Dana Boyle who violated her duty to drive safely and follow the rules of the road. By doing this, she put herself and the drivers around her in grave danger. The evidence will show that it was the illegal and unsafe actions of Dana Boyle that brought us all here today. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for the time and energy that you're going to be spending in this case. And I ask you to listen closely and to render a verdict in favor of the plaintiff, Adrian LeGree. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the defense like to make an opening statement at this point?
Yes, Your Honor, we would.
Very well, you may proceed.
Thank you. May it please the court, members of the jury, and the counsel for the plaintiff in this case. My name is Stephen Colbert, and on behalf of myself and my co-counsel, Matthew Rehouse, and David S. Lewis, we represent the defendant, Dana Boyle, in this case. Now, according to Dana Boyle, in reference to the witness, Carmen Miranda, indeed, liability does not rest with the defendant. Liability, however, does rest with the plaintiff. This will be shown by first using Carmen Miranda's testimony. Carmen Miranda will show that if the plaintiff would have pulled up further to the intersection, then they would have been able, then Legree would have been able to see, indeed, that Boyle was coming down the intersection. This will be shown that it was not possible for this to happen because many obstructions kept the plaintiff from fulfilling this obligation. Next, we have the testimony of Carmen Miranda stating that the plaintiff jack-drived through the intersection at a speed of 15 miles an hour and therefore could not have stopped the impact from taking place. Also, we will show that the plaintiff acted recklessly before and after the accident and caused the accident itself. We will show that the plaintiff also did not understand where the honk was coming from and thought that indeed it was behind the plaintiff. We will show all this, and then we will move on to the plaintiff, or we'll move on to our own witness, Dana Boyle, who will show that indeed, while going at a speed of 35 miles an hour, was not the cause of this accident, and indeed did everything possible to try to stop this accident from taking place. What is irrelevant is the fact that my client has only been driving 2 weeks prior to that accident. What is relevant is right and wrong, and right and wrong is what we have to find out in this case. As the jury, it is your obligation to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the plaintiff like to call a witness in support of their case?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff called Officer Frank Cuffey to the stand.
Very well.
And while the witness is welcome to the stand, I'd like the record to reflect that I was supplying the counsel with a copy of the agreement that we plan to use today.
Very well.
You should write down the bottom state your full name. Frank Cuffey. Spell your last name. Capital K-R-U-P-K-E. Will you tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Please be seated and keep quiet.
Ms. Cuffey, what do you do for a living?
I'm a traffic safety officer for the Springtown Police Department
And how long have you been with the department?
for a full year now.
And what are your duties as a traffic safety officer?
I have many different duties under my job description, but I can issue citations through smart following motor vehicle code provisions. I can investigate accident scenes, and I can manually direct traffic when necessary.
During your duties as traffic safety officer, have you become familiar with the intersection of Main and High Street?
Yes, it's the busiest intersection in town, especially on Main Street around rush hour.
Directing your attention to about 6 o'clock on October 22nd, 1992, the day of the collision. Can you tell me what happened that time?
Well, my chief had ordered me to go to the intersection because the traffic control device, the traffic light, was reported as not functioning properly.
What was wrong with it?
It showed a constant green for High Street and constant red for Main Street.
So what did you have to do?
Well, the traffic was backed up on Main Street because of rush hour, and I attempted to clear that up as quickly as possible.
Officer, can you tell me where you were standing?
I was in the northeast corner of the intersection.
Could you see all right from where you were standing?
I could see at least 500 feet in all directions.
Okay, now you said that the traffic was pretty backed up on Main Street. How did you attempt to clear it up?
Well, I attempted by changing the traffic light at approximately the same intervals as if it was working properly. Of course, it depended on the traffic volume at any particular time.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, on Main Street, I would hold a green for 25 to 30 seconds, followed by a 3-second yellow, and I'd follow that by red. But on High Street, I would hold a 10 to 15 second green, followed by a 1 to 2 second yellow, and I'd follow that by red.
Now you said that you held the yellow signal on High Street for only 1 to 2 seconds. Why?
Well, the traffic was really backed up on Main Street, but on High Street, it wasn't that backed up. So I attempted to clear up the traffic as quickly as possible that way. And besides, the legal speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and if the driver's going that speed, they would have no trouble stopping.
Officer Cuffey, are you familiar with the term all-way red signal?
Yes, I am.
Can you explain it to the jury?
An all-way red signal is when a red light is shown at all traffic lights at the intersection, so so that any traffic in the intersection can be cleared before it turns to green.
Was this option present at the intersection?
No, it's not.
If the light on Main Street turned green, how would that affect the light on High Street?
It would turn red automatically.
Directing your attention to about 6:30 that day, the day of the collision, can you tell me what you were doing at that time?
Well, I had just activated the signal to make a red on Main Street when a little boy approached me going across High Street. The light was green.
Was there any traffic in the intersection at that moment?
Yes. A pickup truck was coming through the intersection, and there was a small black sports car behind it.
About how far away was the sports car from the intersection when you noticed it?
At least 100 feet.
Then what happened?
Well, then I activated the signal to turn the Main Street signal to green and the High Street signal to red.
What happened next?
I heard a car horn to my right from the left, and I turned to see the black sports car still coming through the intersection.
So what did you do?
Well, I turned to make sure the little boy didn't try and cross the street. At that moment, there was no traffic.
What cars were involved?
A gold BMW driven by Adrian LeGree and a black Sedan driven by Dana Boyle.
Immediately after the accident, what did you do?
I checked to make sure everyone was okay, and I called back to send someone to direct traffic as I investigated the accident.
How do you go about completing your investigation?
Well, we talked to the drivers, any witnesses involved, and I investigated the driving records, excuse me, of those drivers.
Where do you put all this information?
In a report.
Your Honor, may I first witness?
Sure.
Officer Copy, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 2. Your Honor, would you like a copy?
Sure.
Officer, can you tell me what this is?
Copy of my accident report.
Is this an accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
Is this a copy of the accident report that you completed on October 22nd, 1993?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time I move that exhibit number 2 be moved as well.
Very well. Any objection, Counsel?
No.
Very well. We'll leave it to-
May I publish it to the jury?
Sure.
Officer Copy, can you explain this while I'm publishing to the jury?
Well, the first 3 pages are just instructions and directions, and the first page of the written report gives information about myself, about the accident location, and information about the 2 drivers and their cars. The next page is a short narrative, any witnesses, any violations indicated, and any test results. The page after that is a continuation of the narrative, and the last page is just a diagram of the accident.
Officer Copy, did you conclude that any violations had occurred that day?
Yeah. I, Dana Boyle, was speeding and had gone through a red light.
About how fast was Dana Boyle going?
35 miles per hour and a 25 mile per hour zone.
And about how fast was Adrian LeGree going?
15 miles per hour.
Officer Copy, did you speak to any witnesses?
Yeah, Carmen Brandon.
And do you remember speaking to this?
Yes, in my accident report, it states on the narrative continued, the first paragraph, the witness stated that he did not see the collision.
Thank you, Officer Copy. Were any of the drivers driving under any sort of restriction?
Yes, Mr. LeGree could not drive in the dark.
Was the sun out at the time of the accident?
Yes, it was.
Were the weather conditions clear enough for any drivers to see any vehicles next to them and lights above them?
Yes.
Counsel, let's face it,
That's beyond the scope of the affidavit.
Counsel, if you care to respond.
Your Honor, it's been stipulated that the weather conditions were clear and dry that day by both parties.
Was it stated by this witness?
I'll overrule the objection. Give counsel's advice.
Were the weather conditions clear enough for anyone to see the drivers next to them and the lights above them?
Yes.
Finally, Officer Copy, what color was the light facing Mr. LeGree when he entered the intersection?
The light was green.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Counsel, at this point, would the defense like to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, Your Honor, we will.
Very well. You may proceed.
Officer Krupke, you've been a traffic safety officer for 1 year, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
At the time of the accident, you were testified that you were changing the light intervals at approximately for the yellow on high, approximately 1 to 2 seconds. Is that correct?
Yes.
As a traffic safety officer, are you aware of the traffic code guidelines?
Yes, I am.
Are you then aware of traffic code PA code 211.1007, section C, which states that the minimum duration for a yellow light is 3 seconds?
It states that it should be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 seconds. Yes, I am.
And did you follow this?
guidelines that are set up. It's under my own discretion whether I should follow them or not.
And did you follow this?
As I said, these are just guidelines. It's under my discretion whether I should follow them.
But
As
did you
traffic
follow
is
them?
linked. Sir, I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask you to direct the witness to answer the question.
It's the answer, but it's just,
Did you follow these
Well,
guidelines?
I would let the witness, try and answer the question as directly as you can, but certainly feel free to clarify your answer or to elaborate any way you deem it appropriate in order to fully explain your answer.
okay. So I didn't follow those guidelines specifically, but it's under my own discretion, as I stated. Because if the traffic isn't that backed up on one street as it is on another, it's under my authority whether it's changed or not.
At the time of the accident, you testified that there was a young boy trying to cross the street. Is this true?
Yeah.
And so you did not see the accident, correct?
No, I was making straight across High Street.
So, you did not see Dana Boyle enter the intersection, did you?
I saw everything up to the time of the impact and after the impact. I just didn't see the impact.
But did you see Dana Boyle enter the intersection?
Yeah, it's all coming up towards the intersection.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to direct your attention to your affidavit where you state that...
Objection, Your Honor, this is improper.
What's the basis of your objection, counsel?
Counsel is going about it in proper way, so be a witness with her own affidavit.
Counsel, do you care to respond to the objection?
I'm asking the witness whether this is her affidavit.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Very well. You may proceed.
I direct your attention to this affidavit. Is it yours?
Yes.
I'm speaking about over here. Where
Proceeding toward east towards the lake.
right,
Proceeding towards the lake.
but you did not see Dana Boyle enter the intersection. Over here.
Yeah, we'll give the witness an opportunity to review the statement, and if you feel there's something inconsistent, you're certainly free to question the witness.
Yes, it's right here. And I turned to see the black car still coming through the intersection. Yes, it's right there.
Still coming through the intersection,
Through the
but you did not see
intersection.
Dana Boyle enter the intersection.
He was still coming through the intersection. I don't understand your question.
The question is whether or not you saw Dana Boyle enter the intersection.
Not enter it like coming through it, but
Thank
it's
you.
coming. I don't.
Okay. In your accident report, you state that you cited Dana Boyle for a number of traffic code violations. But in your affidavit, you state that you did not issue any citations.
No, it's not.
Thank you. In your accident report, you include the results of blood alcohol tests. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And had Professor Legree been drinking?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Very well. Thank you, counsel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the plaintiff like to call any further witnesses in support of their case?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Adrian Legree to the stand.
Very well.
Adrian Legree. Capital Legree.
Will you tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
State it and put the photograph.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a professor of environmental sciences at Beaver College.
Professor Legree, where do you live?
I live at 925 Fairview Avenue, apartment 4B.
Were you living at that address on the day of the accident?
No, on the day of the accident, I was staying at the Corman Suites.
Why exactly were you staying at the Corman Suites and not at your usual home?
Because during that time, my wife and I were going through a divorce, and since she was staying at the house, I decided to move out for a little while.
Now, Professor Legree, I'd like to take you back. Just prior to the accident, where was your car?
It was about a car's length away from the intersection.
What direction were you going?
North on Main Street.
Were there any other vehicles going the same way?
Yes, there was one car in the lane to the left of me up in front of me.
What color was the light?
It was red.
Were you the first car in line at the stoplight?
Yes.
When the light turned green, was there anyone passing in front of you?
Yes, there was a truck going east on High Street.
After the truck passed through, what happened?
I proceeded into the intersection.
How fast were you going?
Only about 15 miles an hour.
What happened when you drove into the intersection?
Well, that was when Dana Boyle came through the red light and the impact occurred.
How did you know Dana Boyle ran a red light?
Well, I had the green light, therefore she must have had the red light.
Did Dana Boyle give any warnings that she was going to run the red light?
No.
What about damages? Did the accident cause any?
Yes, it caused over $5,000 in damages to my car, and I had to take it to the hospital.
Why were you taken to the hospital?
Well, the injury caused pains to my head, neck, shoulder, back, along with a few minor cuts and bruises.
Now, Professor Legree, prior to reaching the intersection, aside from any normal driving activity, did anything occur?
Yes, my car phone rang.
Who was it?
It was my divorce lawyer.
What was your conversation about?
He was just telling me the latest demands my wife was making in the divorce settlement.
While you were talking on the phone, did the conversation have any effect on the ability to control your car?
No.
Did the physical act of using your phone have any ability of you to control your car?
No. No offense.
When you were at the intersection, could you see the light clearly?
Yes, very clearly.
Could you distinguish red from green?
Easily.
As you approached the intersection, could you see the light clearly?
Yes.
When you were stopped at the intersection, could you see the light clearly?
Yes.
When you proceeded into the intersection, could you see the light clearly?
Yes.
What color was the light?
It was green.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Would the defense like to cross-examine at this point?
Yes, we would, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Professor, you have a restricted license which prevents you from driving any time other than day. Is that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you have been in a number of traffic accidents?
Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. The accidents that Mr. Legree has been in before this case are irrelevant to the accident at hand.
Counsel, do you care to respond?
Yes, I would, Your Honor. Defendants or the witness's previous driving record is directly relevant to his ability to operate a vehicle at times other than complete daylight.
Your Honor, we admit that, or Mr. Legree admitted that he does have a restricted driver's license for the dark. I see no reason to bring his past driving record or accidents into the case today.
I'm going to sustain the objection. The court's ruling is that his previous driving record would not be relevant to the issue of liability in this case.
Professor, you testified that you left work on the day in question at 4:30. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And when you left work, Professor, wouldn't you say that you had plenty of time to get home in compliance with your driving restriction?
Yes.
On your way home, however, you decided to stop off at the Quickie Mart. Is that correct?
Yes, I had to get some frozen dinners for the evening.
And wouldn't you say that when you left the Quickie Mart, you still had a good amount of time to get home in compliance with your driving restriction?
Yes.
But then you decided to stop off at your colleague Mahatma Kawadi's apartment. Is that correct?
Yes, he invited me over.
And what time did you leave Mahatma's?
About 6:15, 6 o'clock.
Professor, isn't it true that when you left Mahatma's apartment at 6:15 now, you didn't have nearly as much time as you had when you had originally left for work in order to get home in compliance with your driving restriction?
No, but I still had plenty of time.
But you didn't have nearly as much time as you had when you left the apartment. Is that correct?
No, because about an hour and a half passed.
Thank you very much. And isn't it true that in your sworn affidavit, you testified that it was getting dark when you left Mahatma's apartment, Professor?
Yes, that's why I left, because it was getting dark.
Professor, as you approached the intersection, the car in front of you stopped short, as if it were going to come to a stop, and then it proceeded through the intersection. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this caused you to miss the light, didn't it?
Yes.
Now, being familiar with this intersection, as you've testified that you are, you knew that missing this light meant that you would be unable to make any of the other lights as you proceeded along this road. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. This testimony also is irrelevant because it doesn't have anything to do with the impact in question. It has everything to do with what happened up to the impact, but nothing to do. Dana Boyle's car was not even in sight at the time of this happened.
Counsel, do you care to respond?
I do, Your Honor. Actually, this has a lot of relevance to the witness's state of mind at the time that he went through the intersection. He knew that he would not be able to make any of the other lights and was in a rush to get home in order to comply with the driving restriction, Your Honor.
Your Honor, Adrian Agree was the first person in line for this light. I don't think this is relevant to
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection at this point. It's cross-examination, and the court traditionally likes to allow counsel some latitude in cross-examination. So overrule the objection about it proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor, now you realize that it was going to take you even longer to get home than you had originally planned due to the fact that you had missed this light, didn't you?
Yes, I knew it would take me about 30 seconds longer.
Professor, while you were at Mahatma's enjoying your beers, you and he discussed the details.
This is both argumentative,
I withdraw
irrelevant,
the
and
question. I withdraw
prejudicial.
the
No,
question.
Your
I
Honor.
withdraw the question.
Very well. Since the question's been withdrawn and counsel will move on.
Thank you.
Professor, while you were at Mahatma's, you and he discussed the details of your upcoming divorce, didn't you?
Yes, it came up in conversation.
And then, on your way back home from Mahatma's, your lawyer, Tyrone, called to discuss the matter of the divorce as well, didn't he?
Yes.
In fact, he informed you that your wife not only wanted the house, the Mercedes-Benz, but alimony as well, didn't he?
Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant.
Again, it goes to the witness's state of mind at the time that he crossed the intersection.
I'll overrule the objection. Give counsel some latitude.
That must have made you pretty upset, didn't it, Professor?
A little.
Okay, a little. Professor, do you recall testifying in your affidavit that when your lawyer called, that's all you needed to hear? I started giving Tyrone an earful of what he could tell my spouse's lawyer. Did you classify that as just being a little annoyed?
I never said a little annoyed, it was a little agitated.
So that was a little agitated. Is that correct? Okay. Professor, in your affidavit, you stated that you were so engrossed in your conversation with your lawyer that you didn't even bother to advance your car to the head of the intersection, didn't you?
Yes.
And you also stated that a car pulled up in front of your vehicle and to the left, didn't you?
Yes.
Professor, didn't these two characteristics of your position make it incredibly difficult to get a clear view of the intersection?
Made it somewhat difficult, yes.
Okay. Professor, you had 2 beers while you were at Mahatma's.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, this subject matter is both irrelevant and prejudicial, and we suggest that we discuss this in sidebar, because this should not be discussed in chambers.
Counsel, you want to approach? Very well. Counsel can return. Very well. It's the court's determination that at this point, given the state of the record that has been presented to the court, to sustain the objection to that question.
Professor, isn't it true that in your affidavit you never stated that you hung up the phone with your lawyer?
Never stated it, no.
Okay, thank you.
I assume he
Professor, that's all. You said in your affidavit that you heard a beep and assumed that it came from behind you, correct?
Yes, I heard it from behind.
Okay, Professor, but in your affidavit, you never stated that you even looked behind you to see if there were any cars, did you?
No.
And Professor, isn't it also true that in your affidavit, you never stated that you checked to make sure that the intersection was clear before you proceeded into the intersection?
No, I looked ahead, I saw the truck there, and I let that go by. And then I went into the intersection.
But if you could answer the question, Professor, isn't it true that in your affidavit, you never stated that you checked to make sure that the intersection was clear?
In those exact words, no, I did not state that.
Thank you very much.
Instead, I looked for the truck and let that go by.
No further questions.
Very well. Thank you, counsel. You missed it, counsel. Counsel, at this point, does the plaintiff rest its case?
Yes, Your Honor, plaintiff rests.
Very well. Would the defense like to present any evidence in support of their case?
Yes, Your Honor, we will. And calling Mr. Cunningham.
Very well.
Bible, state your full name.
Carmen Merion,
Spelling last name.
D-E-R-A-N.
Will you tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If you state it, you keep your voice down.
Please state where you live at this particular time.
1313 Mockingbird Lane, in the Rocky Mountain section.
Did you live at this address at the time of the arrest?
Yes.
Could you please explain what your current employment status is?
I'm an accountant for the firm of Lance Steeple and Associates.
Why are you here today?
I witnessed an accident at the intersection of Main and High on October 22nd.
What did you witness?
Well, as I was driving home that night around 6:30, I was driving north on Main Street and I approached the intersection.
And then what did you see?
I noticed ahead of me that the light turned red, and to my right I saw a gold BMW slam on its brake. I then proceeded to approach the crosswalk at the intersection.
And what happened when you approached the crosswalk?
At the crosswalk, I noticed various obstacles, and that's the main reason why I approached the intersection, because to my left, I had trouble seeing because of the close buildings and the many hedges. So I made a point of approaching, or going as far as I could.
So, anywhere behind you, are you saying that obstruction would have impaired your ability to see what was to the left?
I can only speak for myself. I know if I had not pulled up to the position where I was, I would have had quite a few problems to see.
And how was your car positioned to the in reference to the plaintiff's car?
The gold BMW driven by the professor was approximately a car behind me in the right lane.
Okay. What happened after that, continuing with the description?
I was sitting at the intersection, and I noticed that a black Trans Am pulled in from High Street entering the intersection, and it was honking its horn.
So you're stating right now that there was some apparent, so that the honking came from the Trans Am?
Yes. I believe the driver used it as a precautionary measure.
And what happened what happened in reference to the plaintiff's car when the defendant was driving through the intersection?
I heard the screech of brakes, and I noticed the gold BMW, which I had seen earlier, darted into the intersection.
Objection, Your Honor, this is improper characterization. The Officer Puffy and Adrian Grease have stated before that Adrian LeGree was only going 15 miles per hour. I don't think that darted describes that correctly.
Counsel, do you care to respond?
Oh, Your Honor, 50 miles an hour from a complete stop is definitely darting. While it's not 150 miles an hour, it's certainly a lot in comparison to what normal drivers do coming out of the intersection.
Your Honor, I think the jury should be able to decide that.
Well, in any event, I'm going to overrule the objection. Certainly, the council's free to inquire into that cross-examination, but I'll overrule the objection. Proceed, counsel.
And what, could you please repeat your description of what happened with the objection?
Yes, as I was saying, I noticed the gold BMW dart into the intersection, and I also heard the screech of brakes, and there was an impact there in the intersection.
What happened after this impact took place?
After the impact, I pulled my car off the side of the road. I got out to see if everyone was okay, and I approached the two cars, and I noticed that the driver of the Trans Am looked very familiar. In fact, it was Dana Boyle, who is the daughter of my boss.
Where were these cars after the accident took place?
After the accident, I noticed that both of the cars were basically thrown across the intersection. In fact, I can't imagine that the driver of the gold BMW took attempted to brake, because he was driving at such a speed that not only did he cause the Trans Am to be thrown across the intersection, but his car was thrown as well.
Oh, so after that took place, witnessed the accident, and you noticed somebody familiar, how did you ascertain that this was indeed Dana Boyle?
I've known Dana Boyle. She's a very bright kid, very good kid. I coached her on the town soccer league, and as I said, she's the daughter of Tom Thomas.
There's an inquiry in the plaintiff's case here as to why you're coming forward. Now, you did witness what the accident, did you not?
I did witness.
So you were at this time refuting what was stated in the plaintiff's opening as you not witnessing this accident.
Well, as I said, I heard the screech of brakes, and I saw the car dart into the intersection. That split second of impact, perhaps my eye blinked. Perhaps I can't really say that I did see that exact impact, but I did see the accident occur.
Now, did you receive, after this accident took place, a raise in promotion from your accounting firm?
Yes, I was promoted from staff accountant to supervisor at the firm. But this came after many years of hard work. And with the substantial promotion also came an increase in responsibility, which means less time for me.
Thank you.
Would the plaintiff like to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well, you may proceed.
You have known Dana for quite some time, haven't you?
Yes.
In fact, you were Dana's coach on the soccer league, isn't that right?
Yes, at one time I did coach her on the town soccer league.
You're an accountant, correct?
Yes, I worked for the firm of Nancy Boyle.
And you work for Dana's father, right?
Yes.
Didn't the accident happen on October 22nd of 1992?
Indeed it did.
Since that day, Dana's father has given you a promotion, isn't that correct?
Indeed it is correct, but I might say, as I said earlier, that I've worked for quite some time at the firm, and I really feel that I deserve this promotion. Any connection that the plaintiff might be trying to infer, I would see as only coincidental.
So you're telling us it's just a coincidence that you received this promotion right after the day of the accident and prior to today?
Yes.
Your Honor, I've no further questions for this witness.
Very well. Sir, thank you. You may step down. Would the defense like to present any other evidence?
Yes, Your Honor, we would. The defense calls Dana Boyle.
Dana Boyle, spelling B-O-Y-L-E. Please have a trade contract and mathematics truths. Yes, I will. Please be seated if you wish that.
Hello, Dana. Where do you live?
At 1822 Ridge Road in Springtown.
And how old are you?
I'm 18 years old.
Would you classify yourself as a good student?
Yes, I would be plus average and have been accepted to Stanford University.
Where do you work?
At Sussex Fantastic in the Rocky Bluff Mall.
And how long have you worked there?
For 2 years.
How was your attendance?
I've never been late.
Do you take the same route to work every day?
Yes, I did.
And for how long have you taken that route?
For about 2 years.
What is that route?
I take High Street east.
So it'd be fair to say that you're familiar with the intersection.
Yes, fair.
How long have you been driving, Dina?
For about a month.
On the day of the accident, did you notice anything unusual about the lights at that intersection?
They seem to be going at a more rapid pace.
So they were changing faster than usual?
Yes.
As you were approaching the intersection, what happened?
The light turned green, and the light with the sun reflected off the truck in front of me and got right in my eye. I slowed down and fixed my radio to try to turn down the volume.
So before the intersection, you were looking up.
Yes, I was.
And as you entered the intersection, did you do anything to warn the other drivers?
Yes, I laid on my horn so they would be aware that I was coming through.
What was the light as you entered the intersection?
It was yellow.
Did any of the cars move when you entered the intersection?
No, none of the cars except a gold BMW which darted out into the intersection.
And were you wearing your seatbelt at the time of the accident?
Yes, I was.
What was the result of that accident?
My left arm was broken. There was severe damage to my car, and I may be unable to afford insurance for many years to come.
How fast were you going on High Street approaching the intersection?
35 miles per hour.
And you've gone through this intersection other times with no trouble, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Did you know that that was above the speed limit?
No, at the time of the accident, I did not.
So in the past, you have never had any trouble going through that intersection at that speed?
No, I haven't.
What time does your shift start at work?
6:30.
And what time do you normally leave to go to that shift?
At 6:15.
Was there any difference on this day?
No, I left at 6:15 on this day also.
So everything happened the same time as usual?
Yes.
Did you receive any citations from that accident?
No, I did not.
No further questions, Your Honor. Very well. Would the plaintiff like to cross-examine?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Miss Boyle, isn't it true that you had a learner's permit for only a few weeks before getting your driver's license?
Objection, Your Honor, for all of this.
Your Honor,
Counsel,
Dana...
if you care to respond.
Yes, Your Honor. Dana Boyle is an inexperienced driver, and when she ran through that red light, she was making a judgment of someone who hasn't been driving for maybe years and years.
I haven't heard any of that come out in this testimony here today so far, and I don't really see how we can draw a conclusion that Dan is an experienced driver.
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection, and it's cross-examination. I'm going to allow counsel to make inquiry into this area. Proceed.
Now I'm going to ask you this again. Isn't it true that you had a learner's permit for only a few weeks before getting your driver's license?
I haven't had my learner's permit for some time, yes.
And am I correct in saying that prior to the accident, you've only been driving alone with an adult license for 2 weeks? Isn't that right?
Yes, that is true.
So prior to the accident, you've only been driving a car for a month or so. Is that correct?
Yes, but I've been through the intersection many times on my way to work.
As you're approaching High Street, you assumed you knew the timing of the lights. Isn't that right?
I assumed from my experience from going through the lights, yes.
And when the light turned from red to green, you also assumed that you had enough time to get through. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
Part of the reason of this assumption was because you were going 35 miles per hour. Isn't that right?
I'm not sure of that.
Now, isn't it true that the time it takes to get from point A to point B depends on your speed?
Objection.
Your Honor, I just want to show that the reason why Dana Boyle ran the light was because, or the reason Dana Boyle couldn't stop was because she was going too fast.
Well, I'll overrule the objection. I think it's appropriate for counsel to inquire into this area.
I'll ask you again. Now, isn't it true that the time it takes to get from point A to point B depends on your speed?
I guess so, yes.
Isn't it true that you can get from where you were when the light changed to the other side of the intersection in a certain amount of time, dependent upon your speed?
I guess so, I don't know.
Now, you pride yourself on never being late for work, is that right?
I've never been late to work before.
You also said that your black Trans Am can really move when it has to, isn't that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that while you were approaching the intersection, you reached down to lower the volume on your car stereo?
Yes, when I push button stereo, yes, I did.
Didn't it take you a little while to find the button?
No, it only took a second or two.
So while you were approaching the intersection, you were concentrating on lowering the volume on your car stereo?
No, I was not. I brought back my attention to the road by that time.
Well, Dana, you were at least paying some attention to doing something other than driving at that time, isn't that right?
This was when I was still 100 feet away from the intersection.
Yes. Is that right?
Yes.
You said that when you were 50 feet from the intersection, you saw the light turn from green to yellow, correct?
Yes.
Doesn't yellow mean it's going to turn red soon?
Yes, I guess so, in about 3 seconds.
And you also said that the reason why you ran the light is because you couldn't slow down in time. Is that correct?
I entered the intersection while the light was still yellow.
When you entered the intersection, you were 50 feet from the intersection, weren't you?
No, I was into the intersection when I entered this.
Excuse me, when you were 50 feet from the intersection, that's when the light turned yellow,
Yeah.
right?
Objection. That's the answer.
I just want to establish another point.
Still asking answer.
It is still asking answers, but...
Okay, well, you'll move on.
Yes, I will. Now, are you telling me 50 feet is not enough time to stop?
I'm saying that at this time, I decided to proceed into the intersection with caution and to allow the people on either side of Main Street to realize I was coming through by honking my horn and warning them.
Okay, but you answer my question. Is 50 feet enough time for you to stop?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, ma'am. Does the defense have any further evidence?
No, Your Honor, we don't.
And at this point, the defense would rest its case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Members of the jury, I believe that this is the appropriate time to hear the closing addresses of counsel. Would the defense like to make their closing address at this point?
Yes, we are. We're ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Very well.
Your Honor, members of the jury, first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear the facts of the case in question today. And second of all, I'd like to address the myriad of information that you've heard presented to you in this courtroom today. You've heard a number of facts, and a lot of these seem confusing and contradictory in nature. But what we must attempt to do is to focus our attention on the true essential facts of this case. The essential facts of this case are as follows. First of all, Carmen Veranda has testified that his own view was definitely obstructed by 3 elements: by a building, by a bush, and by the glare that was shining in his eyes at the time that he was stopped at the intersection. And therefore, based on this testimony, we can clearly conclude that the view of Professor Adrian Legree was also obstructed due to his position, and in fact was probably more obstructed because he also had to contend with Carmen Veranda's automobile as well. Now, Officer Krupke has testified that she prematurely changed the light from yellow to red. The expected time is 3 to 5 seconds, the minimum being 3 seconds. She changed it in 1 to 2 seconds. Now, this is a violation of the guidelines which she is given, and as a first-year officer, we have to question whether or not she has the judgment to make those kind of decisions for herself. And second of all, Officer Krupke has testified before you that she did not witness the impact. And therefore, how can we accept anything she said? As the plaintiff has said, the only thing that is relevant to this case is what happened when the 2 cars collided in the middle of the intersection. Therefore, anything besides the fact that what she knows, that she changed the light prematurely, everything else that she has said to you today is entirely irrelevant to this case because she did not witness the collision. Now, my client, Dana Boyle, has testified to something very important. She's testified to the fact that when she entered the intersection, when she crossed the threshold of the intersection, the light had not yet turned red. It was only after she had crossed the threshold that the light turned red. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is entirely legal according to Pennsylvania traffic codes that apply to this trial today. Therefore, she didn't break any laws by entering the intersection. Now, Adrian Legree has also testified to some very essential facts in this case. He has testified that he was in a rush to get home on that day because he needed to comply with his driving restriction. He has testified that he is in the midst of a very messy divorce and that he was talking to his lawyer at the time of the accident. And he had been talking to a friend about the divorce very shortly prior to the accident. Professor Adrian Legree has also testified that he did not, although he thought he heard a beep from behind him, he did not state in his affidavit that he ever turned to see whether or not there was really even a car there. He has also testified that he did not, in his affidavit, ever once state that he looked to make sure that the intersection was clear. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is illegal. Now let's go to the scene of the accident. Dana Boyle enters the intersection. The light is still yellow when she crosses the threshold, perfectly legal. There's no negligence. Now, when Professor Legree entered the intersection, he had a lot on his mind. He had to contend with the divorce. He knew he had to get home in time to comply with his driving restriction. And he also knew that now that he had missed this light, he would have to speed up in order to make the other lights, which was going to be a very difficult problem because he was very familiar with the intersection. But the last thing on Professor Legree's mind was checking to make sure that that intersection was clear. He never even stated in his affidavit that he did so, and therefore we can conclude that he did not. This makes Professor Legree liable in the case before us today. It's as simple as that. And therefore, we, the defendant, ask that you render your verdict in favor of the defendant, Dana Boyle.
Thank you very much. Thank you, counsel. Would the plaintiff like to make some closing remarks in support of their case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, as introduced by my co-counsel, my name is Sun Hee Hong. The case before you is about adhering to the rules of the road. By disobeying the rules, accidents like this can happen. On October 22nd, there was an accident because Dana Boyle failed to abide by the rules of the road. It's as simple as that. Now let's go over what's occurred today. At about 6 p.m., Officer Krupke arrived at the intersection of Main and High, a busy crossroad located in Springtown. The traffic signal was not functioning properly, so she manually operated the red, green, and yellow traffic signals. At about 6:30 p.m., she noticed a black Trans Am driven by Dana Boyle on High Street, approaching the intersection at 10 miles higher than the law permits. Notwithstanding this excessive speed, Officer Krupke thought that Dana had plenty of time to stop, since she was 100 feet away from the intersection when the light turned yellow. A few seconds later, Officer Krupke activated the red light for High Street. Now the traffic signal for Main Street was green. This was where my client, Mr. Legree, was waiting patiently. He noticed that the light on his side turned green just as the truck crossed in front of him. He heard the car beep. Since the light on his side was clearly green, he proceeded into the intersection. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Dana Boyle raced through the intersection and collided with my client's car. By her own admission, the High Street traffic signal was red, but Dana Boyle did not stop. Dana is a young, inexperienced driver. She only had her license for 2 weeks. But one of the first things a young driver should learn is what the red, green, and yellow traffic signal means. Green means go. Yellow means caution. And folks, red means stop. we all didn't have to be here today. This accident could have been prevented if Dana had followed the rules of the road, the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Codes. She admitted that the only reason she went into the intersection was because she could not stop. And why couldn't she stop? Because Dana Boyle was speeding. No matter what she has told you, no matter what her lawyers want you to believe, this accident and the injuries it caused come down to one single thing. Dana Boyle was speeding. The most outrageous aspect of this case is that Dana Boyle is countersing my client after she races through the intersection, runs a red light, and then causes the collision. She's asking my client to compensate her. Her so-called eyewitness, Carmen Miranda, works for Dana's father. Since the day of the accident, Carmen Miranda received the promotion from Dana Boyle's father. And Dana Boyle expects you to believe the testimony of Carmen Miranda. The judge will instruct you that the definition of negligence is that someone who has an obligation to uphold the standard but failed to do so, thus inflicting injuries upon others. In this case, Dana Boyle did not follow the rules of the road, and her conduct caused my client to suffer. When you come back with a verdict in favor of the plaintiff, you will be sending a message to drivers like Dana Boyle. You will be telling her that the road belongs to everyone, that automobiles can be a dangerous weapon, and that every night, in every street, in every neighborhood, we all should be able to come home safely. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Members of the jury, at this point, the evidence has been concluded and the counsel have given their closing speeches, so it would be appropriate to Oh, okay. Well, at this point, okay, at this particular point, you wish to retire?
We can retire on that,
Very well, sure. At this particular point in time, the jury are deliberating, and they're the ones who are going to make a judgment in regard to assigning you the points for the respective opinions. Perhaps I could just make a few remarks. I'd like to commend both the teams, the plaintiff from Norristown High School and the defense from Merion High School, for very ably presenting the case. I think all of the coaches and the student, the attorneys who work with the students should also be commended. I'm sure some of the other students from high school and perhaps some of the parents are present in court today. And I'd like to commend all of you for this very worthwhile activity, because I do think it's something which is of great value to all of you as students, and will be of great value to you later in your career. And I thought all of you were thoroughly knowledgeable in the material that was used, and argued your case very effectively. In a civil case, the burden is for the plaintiff to prevail by a fair weight of the evidence. That is, it's not a criminal standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, but simply a civil standard. Based upon the evidence that was presented, this court would award it in favor of the plaintiff. That is, on a fair weight of the evidence, the court's judgment would be that the plaintiff would prevail. But once again, that's simply based on the facts of a particular case. That in no way, is any statement in regard. The jury ultimately is going to decide who the real winner is in terms of the scoring, in terms of the presentation. But I would like to, as I said, commend all of you for being involved in this worthwhile activity in all the schools. It's a very valuable activity. And, certainly we welcome you here to the Montgomery County Courthouse. I believe all of you were here last week, perhaps in the courtroom last week. We're certainly happy to help out in this particular program because it is worthwhile. And a number of our judges are willing to volunteer their time to make themselves available because I think it's important that we work with the young people of our county. Unfortunately, in our job, we do have occasion from time to time to run into young people, but usually it's up in the juvenile court where we see some young people who are very much confused, involved in unfortunate circumstances. Certainly, very reassuring for me to see a new generation of young people who are making an effort to acquire some very important skills. You know, I still recall, it's 25 plus years ago, when I was in high school, I was very active in the same activities. I was a high school debater and enjoyed very much being involved in those types of activities. I'm very pleased to see that the new generation is continuing in that effort. I think it is very worthwhile. Well, at this particular point in time, why don't we declare a recess, and then we'll allow the jury to come back, and at that point they'll be rendering their determinations. So at this point, we'll recess to the call of the crime.
Your Honor, before you
Sure.
recess, we would just like to thank you for the time that you've spent, how valuable your time. We know it's very valuable, and we want to thank you for the afternoon that you gave us here today. And your comments are well appreciated, I'm sure, from both cases. Thank you
Very
very
well.
much.
Thank you.
Court will recess to the call of the crier.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to announce the score. So.
I think the judge has got him handle the verdict too.
I was saying,
Great. The judge is now Please remain seated. Court is resumed.
Counsel, it's my understanding that the jury has had an opportunity to deliberate, and they may have some comments in regard to their evaluation of the case. Do any of the jurors wish to make any comments?
Well, I would just announce, Your Honor, that according to our scoring at this point, we scored at 158 for plaintiff to 145 for defendant. And if I still know how to divide properly, that comes to 52.66 for plaintiff and 48.33 for defendant. There were no time penalties, by the way. And I don't know if any of the scorekeepers have any comments or critique they want to make. Great job, everybody. The only comment I would make is that if a judge renders a decision on an objection that you don't like, you know, try not to show it in your face. That would be my only comment.
That's what appeals are for, right?
That's right. And I don't find it very appealing when somebody does it.
Hey.
On that happy note, you're all
We worked that out beforehand.
On that happy note, you're all welcome back to the bar building, and we'll have the final scores of the whole competition for you, hopefully in short order. So, thanks very much.
Well, at this point, court will adjourn.
Who did he find?
I don't know. Who did he find for, Tom? Did he have did he render a verdict?
Which I think is the same thing I was doing.
But that's a lot better, especially your cross-examine guy.
The guy that did the opening didn't. He was like, he's arrogant.
Yeah, he's like the rest of them.
The rest of them work together. I mean, he came, but then.
But you can see he has the ability.
17 going on 50.
Yeah, he's a smart kid, and he knows it, and that's why he didn't. Right. But when the rest of them have to do it,
Closing argument was very good.